Most of our self-esteem issues stem from childhood. I think that goes without saying. I think almost everyone that's watching this right now can probably agree with me on that point. Your self-esteem is shaped, they say, I know they is a very relative term. They say, because it's like, who is they, right? But they say that, I don't know who it is, experts say that your self esteem is formed the first 8, 9 years of your life. And for most people, I think that's true. But a lot of the things that we were taught, as far as like ourselves and the world and society as a whole, the things that were sort of reinforced to us as children, can be deprogrammed from our subconscious and can really help us start to heal our self esteem and work through a lot of those issues, because I think that if we don't identify what those issues are and process them properly and feel them properly, allow them to absorb our being so that we can properly feel them and then release them, if we don't do that in a healthy manner, they'll just continue to manifest themselves in every single decision that you make throughout your entire life. And I think that that's what happens to most people. This is why you see so many adults who are miserable, because they were told certain things when they were growing up, and certain things were reinforced to them, and there were things that stuck. And I think that a lot of people just identify with what's happened to them. Like with hardcore alcoholics, right? You talk to any alcoholic for long enough, they all live in the past. Every single one of them. They all live in the past. And that's a fucking, living in the past is a dangerous affliction, man. It really is. You gotta take what you've learned and just move and ebb and flow. And I think when people don't follow their intuition, that's when they become more and more miserable. You have to follow what your heart is telling you to do. I'm a huge fan of the idea of like, go with your heart, go with your gut, go with your instinct. And most people don't do that. And that's why most people have a low self-esteem, because if they did follow their heart, then they would have a higher self-esteem because they would be living within their purpose. And I can't tell you what your purpose is. Everybody's different, right? I think that self-esteem and self-confidence comes from pursuing difficult things and coming out the other side stronger. I also think it comes from not apologizing for being yourself and being loud about how much of yourself you really are. Most people just are content with being like everyone else, with walking and talking and behaving like everybody else. And I think that that's why so many people are so unhappy. You know, too many people follow the herd. And the problem is that a lot of people who go along with the herd, what they all don't realize collectively as a whole is that they're all jumping off a cliff. I always think about how many people I know who have lived in their hometown their entire life and have never lived anywhere else and don't really go anywhere else. And that must be miserable, man. That must be a terrible affliction, to be stuck in one place. It doesn't sound like any fun to me, man. And also, another issue, and this is something that a lot of people overlook, I think, in our society today, is these fucking phones. And I know it's kind of a contradiction because most likely you're watching this on a phone. But I'm I think that social media is the greatest invention, yet the worst invention that has ever existed in the history of inventions. While it's revolutionized the way we do things and it's become a gold mine for content creators and entrepreneurs and people who want to make a lot of money, it's set up a great opportunity for an unprecedented opportunity, really. While that's great and that's all well and good, Most people don't use it for that purpose. You know, we have two different types of people in this world. We have creators and we have consumers. And the people who consume the bulk of the content are typically the most miserable. Whereas the people who are creating the content and putting the content out tend to be, you know, free. And I think that if you create more than you consume, it gives you a sense of purpose and it's good for the soul. Genuinely. Also, get outside as much as possible because nature, people get tired of me saying this, but nature is a medicine, unlike any other medicine you will ever take. And I I won't say that I'm anti pharmaceuticals and that I'm anti medication because I'm not anti any drug of any kind. It just depends on how the drug is used and at what frequency the drug is used. But I feel as though, and I'm going to sound controversial for saying this, we in America in particular have over identified with the medical industry and the pharmaceutical industry's definition of what it means to be mentally ill and to have low self esteem and depression and anxiety and all these sorts of things. And I think that oftentimes medication and therapy act as a band aid rather than a solvent, a solution. And it's kind of like, and this is going to sound very cliche once again, it's like putting a bandage over just putting a bandage over a bullet wound. If you don't get down to the root of the problem, the medication is never going to fix anything. And once again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical professional. I'm not a mental health professional. As you can probably tell just by looking at me, at least a couple of my wires are crossed. But what I'm saying is that also, that leads me to my next point. I think that we in our society today act as though having a couple of wires crossed is a bad thing, right? It needs to be treated, it needs to be eradicated, you know, or whatever. And, or not eradicated, but it needs to be dealt with, it needs to be subdued, it needs to be, you know, medicated. And I think that some people do need medication, right? I think Kanye needs medication, clearly. If he's not already on some, he definitely needs some. Not to call out Kanye. Kanye is one of my favorite artists. He's brilliant. He's also fucking crazy. But self-esteem, I think, comes from, if you look at the people with the lowest self-esteem a lot of times, and not always, but often, there are a lot of people with low self-esteem who are very different, unique, outside of the box thinkers, and they're told that that's bad, right? That they shouldn't be that way, and that's just not true. I think people who are different, people who are like the creative types, they need to foster that energy as much as possible and they need to embrace that as much as possible and put that out into the world as much as possible because that's quite literally what we've been put on this earth to do, is to create, is to distribute our creativity to the world, to share it with the world. That's the whole reason that we're here in the first place. And I think that self-esteem comes from not just doing things that you're passionate about, not just pursuing those passions. That's part of it. Another part of it is pursuing difficult things and coming out the other side better, right? That's another element of having high self esteem. And also fighting off that resistance, right? Because we all have that voice, right, that tells us, that tries to keep us from doing things that we know we should do. that pulls us backward. The key is not to try to eradicate that, because it can never be eradicated. You will most likely live with that voice for the rest of your life. The key is to fight it and not to give in to it. And the more you do that every single day, that you get up and you fight that voice, you have won the battle for that day. And yeah, that's really it. I think self-esteem it comes down to pursuing difficult things and coming out the other side stronger and smarter. It also has to do with, if you're somebody like me, fostering your creativity. And then it also has to do with not comparing yourself to other people, because, in this day and age with, the digital age with social media, it's very easy to look at other people who you perceive to be better than you or have more than you, and think that you're worthless or that you're no good because you don't have what these people have. So my answer to that is another thing that's kind of unorthodox. We all heard the story about the tortoise and the hare, right? In school, we learned about that. And I think the message that most people got from that story was that the reason that the tortoise won was because the hare was cocky and egotistical and arrogant. And so he took a nap, like 6 yards away from the finish line, because he was like, well, I could take a nap for as long as I want. There's no way in hell the tortoise will ever catch up to me. And that's part of it, right? I think that was a part of the story of, don't be cocky, don't be egotistical, don't be arrogant, always keep your foot on the gas. But also, the tortoise was running his own race. The tortoise wasn't concerned with beating the hare. He was running his own race. He was in his own lane. He didn't care. And that was another part of it. He was just like, I don't care. I'm doing my own thing. I'm out here, and I'll get to the finish line when I get to the finish line. That's what a lot of y'all got to understand, because there's always going to be people who are going to get there quicker than you. It doesn't mean they're better than you. They're just running a different race than you. You can't compare your level 3 to somebody else's level 33. It doesn't work that way. You have to just stay in your lane. The only person you should ever be in competition with is yourself. Truth be told, right? The person you were yesterday. And I think that, comparison is the killer of all joy. The saying is a cliche for a reason. And yeah, so I just wanted to give y'all some encouragement and tell you that self-esteem comes from just running your own race and embracing who you are and being proud of who you are and not taking shit from people. As always, if you're new here, be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you don't miss a single video every time I upload. And I will see you all in the next video. Oh, also, but before I go, I've been working on some things, and I have an announcement. Here very, very soon, I will be releasing my first ever